We'll move on to the final segment for today, which is a session on sustainability and the future directions of long-term care services. To kickstart this conversation, I'm going to invite our moderator for the session, Sharon Buteau. Sharon has over 15 years of experience in the field of research and international development as the Executive Director of the Leveraging Evidence for Access and Development at Krea University. Sharon leads the strategic direction of the organization and provides oversight to research, policy, and capacity building engagements. She's had extensive experience in building important partnerships between academia, donor agencies, policymakers, and practitioners to promote evidence-based policy making and practice at scale. We're very happy to have you, Sharon. Our first panelist for this session, Dr. Sujatha Rao, served as the Union Secretary in the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare for the Government of India until 2010. She was involved in several key projects: the first ever national program for non-communicable diseases, the process for a national policy for the use of antibiotics and introducing vaccines in public health. She's also the founder of the Public Health Foundation of India. And in her 36 years of service as a civil servant, she spent 20 years in the health sector in different capacities at the state and federal levels. Please join us on stage, Dr. Sharon. Next, we have Mr. S.M. Vijayanand. For those of you who may have missed his session earlier today, he is a trustee with the Banyan and the former chief secretary to the government of Kerala. In the past, he also served as the secretary in Ministry of Panchayati Raj Government of India and has held various other positions with the government. He has played a nodal role in conceptualizing and nurturing Kudumbashri, a women's self-help group movement in the state of Kerala. Next, we have Mr. Paul Glick. Again, for those of you who may have missed our first session of the day, Mr. Glick is the Executive Director of the Rural India Supporting Trust and has assisted in the growth of RIST as a respected grant-giving entity focused on poverty alleviation in India. He is a career international development professional that has had extensive experience in all aspects of program implementation and management. Next. Next, we have Dr. Mahesan Ganesan, who has worked as a consultant psychiatrist at the National Institute of Mental Health, Colombo, Sri Lanka. Prior to his work at the NIMH, he worked extensively in the conflict and tsunami-affected district in eastern Sri Lanka, where he was instrumental in developing a community mental health service model with minimal resources. He was also instrumental in developing the concept of GBV desk in the district in 2005 and helped establish similar services in 5 other hospitals. We're very happy to have you with us. Finally, we have Dr. Yutaro Setoya, the team lead for non-communicable diseases and comorbidities at the WHO India Country Office. Specializing in public health, he's had over 20 years of experience in health research and health system development, particularly in community health and global mental health. Before moving to India, Dr. Setoya served as a country liaison officer at the WHO Tonga office, and has also spent 3 years in Fiji supporting the Pacific countries with strengthening their mental health systems. Thank you all very much for being here with us today. Sharon, over to you.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. So thanks so much. It's very hard to start a panel after the really super touching one before. I think it's quite endearing. However, it's at the end of the day. I'll try to make this brief. But I also highlight a thank you to Baum and the whole team to actually put this topic on the front. I think it's quite critical that one talks about it. And it speaks to my own experience. I think a lot of things I could relate. So the title today is about sustainability and future decisions on long-term care services for homeless persons with mental illness. So I think the topic of SIM is critical. Everyone's work is so endearing. I would say it's more than a labor of love. It's like intense commitment and all. having worked in this sector for a long time. Oh, sorry, I thought you were telling me don't start. Okay, great, thank you. As well, this has been wonderful as well, the speech. So the tremendous effort that it makes to put all this together, because you have to have finding, you have to have talent, you also have to find momentum, you have to put all of these things together with limited resources. I think I would give a big applaud and actually standing ovation for what the team has done so far here. The topic today as well, when we talk about home again, people talk about the physical, finding a house, putting people together, but the long-term care requires, and I think some people on the panel had highlighted already, home again is about being home to oneself, and that's a much longer journey, and one that actually requires financial resources, patience, time, partnerships, and continuous funding as well. These people require stability and reliability. A little bit when I was looking at the topic, and I think I'm an economist by profession, so sorry, I look things by number, but I also try to put a lot of heart in it. And when you look at the effort of raising funds and putting this together, it is nowhere the cost of what it would do of not doing anything. If you look at cost of not doing anything, you know the direct and indirect costs about just the hospitalization, the impact on the families. Even being economists, I look at numbers like parasitism, absenteeism, productivity, and things like that, even if we want to take a human approach. The cost of not doing anything is immense. The cost of funding an organization like Banyan is absolutely small compared to the chaos if this organization is not here. So I want to highlight, it's even if an economist, I want to put numbers to it, it's hard to compute. The world works that way, we have to realize that. But I would say this is an immense favor and really endeavor. So I'll also let the panelists talk more than I would. So I will start with Dr. Setoya. And being WHO, by the way, I'm meeting tomorrow Dr. Sonia Swanetan, who happens to be in Chennai, who I'm a big fan as well. So from your perspective, WHO is one of the biggest programs, sort of like world globally, and it also has subject to funding problems as well, and how do you keep the programs relevant? And even so, within the context globally, I feel even the context of how BALM is doing, because India is several countries in one, in several generations in one, in several centuries in one. So how do you deal with that? I would say globally as well, you probably have. So if you can give your experience on that, yeah.
Sure. Thank you, Sharon, and good evening, everybody. My name is Yutaro. I would like to first thank Banyan for inviting me on behalf of WHO. And I was listening, I came yesterday evening around this time, 5 o'clock, and since then I've been listening to all the stories with great interest, and I'm amazed about how much passion, how much experience, how much knowledge you have in this room. It's amazed by, the commitment. I thought, because of the day of the session, I thought half of you will be gone by now, but it shows the commitment you have, that you're very, passionate about this topic. And on behalf of WHO, I would like to commend Banyan and the partners' work in this several decades, supporting the people on the ground. We are talking, I think the theme of it is, one of it is recovery and hope. And I think that's why we do need a long-term support. I don't say it's an infinite support, but still we do need a long-term care, not like communicable disease, we give medication and we recover. It's not like that. And recovering is not like this, right? Everybody in the room knows that it doesn't go like this, it goes like this, and there's relapse, and and then, but slowly, gradually, we go towards recovery, and that's what WHO recommends and aspire for as well. So, for example, yesterday evening, I think somebody had a question that their client only worked for 2 months and had quit the job or relapse. But from our point of view, from recovery point of view, supported employment point of view, working 2 months is already a success. It's a great success that the person was able to work for 2 months. And we learn from the mistakes, and then try for the next time, Everything is not a failure, it's an experience of success. And for example, we may think about what was a failure. Maybe we can try to reduce the time of the work, or we can think about maybe. I had one client in Japan before joining WHO. I had one client. Sorry, maybe I'm becoming
no problem.
a bit out of context.
Right.
But I had one client who wanted to work at the department store, and she was able to kind of work, but had some relapse or some issues. Not a relapse, sorry. It was the issue was that she was too drowsy to be attentive to conduct the work. So with her care manager, she discussed with her doctor, and they decided to decrease her medication. Yeah, when she reduced the medication, there will be a little bit more hallucination she will have, but she was less drowsy. She was more attent, and she can manage the hallucination, but she will be more attent that she can actually work at more intensively with a little bit less of medication. Of course, it's a delicate balance, and we need to of course, discuss with the team, with the psychiatrist, etc. But this is what we want. We don't want to manage only the symptoms. We want to support their recovery. So coming back to the point, I think we do need sustainable funding. And of course, across the world, these kind of things happens happening from a champion. In some cities, there's a champion. I think that's how Banyan and others, many of the NGOs started, which has a very, motivated parents, motivated client, which started some project out of need, and then started develop. So we do need those kind of champion to begin those things. But after that, of course, it needs to be more sustainable. So what happened is that usually those family group, patient group forms a group to discuss or negotiate with the government. So, and then kind of advocate for their rights, advocate of their good work. Sometimes it needs to have a little bit of framework, like a TOR or guidelines, or sometimes I think in Housing First, what was her name? Deborah talked about the fidelity, about the model. So we need to have some framework, like how many staff is needed, etc., so that we have a little bit of replicability to make it more convincible to the authority to have. And then sometimes what happened is that government or maybe in India case, maybe state government have a MOU or PPP or some agreement that some of the funding continuously goes to those NGOs and other organizations. And it should be increased more and more. I think there's much less across the world, especially in the low and middle income countries where WHO mainly support. Most of the funding goes to curative care and mostly at the hospital itself. 90% or more is spent on hospital. But we need to increase the community health service, and we need to support more funding to those kind of NGOs who are supporting more support on the ground. I think a good example for New Zealand. So they have, when they're governed by district health board, but when they have 100% funding for mental health, 30% goes to hospital, 30% goes to community mental health, but 30% actually goes to NGO. So a large chunk of their fund will go into those supporting on the ground. So there's more.
Great, Dr. Sir, I think those are great examples. The first thing is encouraging policy, how they view budgets. That I know Balm has doing a lot as well. And unfortunately, Achket could not be here, but he would be the pro of understanding, what is best for health system creation. The other thing I also highlight, and I think is quite critical, is in myself as well, working in the sector, is how to identify unicorns. That person who has the willingness, the talent, the ability to bring on people. Even if that is not sustainable, that's the first seed. And I think for me, trying to crack this, I've resorted to either you identify them or you groom them. So grooming these community and training, what is that spark, that combination of things that allow that amount of energy, and actually this example of bringing people together, that should be replicated and studied as well. So I've been also myself trying on different sides, but I think also that will also help to understand how to sustain those community level, because that's your first way of getting up. We even see during COVID time that those are the first responders, which is super essential, especially in the Indian context. Thank you. So I'll pass quickly my question to Dr. Mahesan, and I'm glad that Dr. Setoya used the word recovery. So I'm trying to mince my words. So some of the things I observe being in the development sector in general, maybe specifically in this domain, is we live what I call into a VUCA world, where it's vulnerable people, I guess uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. The world is becoming a little bit unstable as well, which also has repercussions on people's mindset. When I see some of these studies where they say that 50% is genetics, how you think, 10% is life circumstance, and 40% is how your mind reacts to different shocks. And the world has become a bit different than it was even 20 years ago. So the perspective that homelessness can be a global problem, not just India per se. How does your perspective on that, how do we look at that? How do we analyze that? And as well, obviously, I'm Canadian, and I know that homelessness is a problem there. But I also see sometimes, even San Francisco, for example, the homelessness is startling more even than in Chennai. Maybe because I'm more startled because I don't expect it there. So how does one view that from your crisis, like Vandana mentioned in Sri Lanka, to from a global ideation problem?
Yeah, I agree with you. The way the world is going with the income disparity, economic downturn, and the pandemics, and of course global warming is coming in as a big thing. So I think homelessness is going to be a coming emerging problem. And unless we are prepared for it, it's going to lead to a huge disaster. Right? It has major implications, not only for the people who are homeless, who have mental health issues and homeless. They do have issues. They're going to have major issues. But it's also going to have a huge impact on the society as a whole. Right? I mean, simply the fact of stigma. Like when you see a client in the Home Again project at home and see another client on a bus station or a railway station lying on the road, what sort of impression the young people, the children who are seeing that going to get? And what is that going to do to the stigma that they are going to develop about mental health, mental illnesses in the future? Right? So by ignoring the problem and allowing people to be on the road with mental health issues, we are going to worsen the stigma issue and further marginalized. And also when these young people do get a mental health problem, are they going to access services? Right? So we know one of the reasons why people delay accessing services is this huge stigma thing. And also what it does to the society at large. What sort of message we are giving as a society, what are we? How much we are caring for people who are vulnerable, who can't look after themselves, for the values of the society. And so it's going to have a kind of a deep spiritual or philosophical degradation that's going to happen if we allow more and more people to be on the roads. So it's going to take human society down if this becomes worse. So it is an urgent issue and we need to plan for it. And as Vandana said that day, there is no model. We need to develop different modules for different contexts and different types of clients, different environments. And we need to keep on talking about it and doing it and demonstrating these models. Upscaling has been one of the major challenges that we have had. I mean, I was happy to hear that Italy, they had a problem upscaling the Trustee model because we have had problems. Not that I was happy, but I was happy that you shared the same problems that we had. Right? We also have developed models, small models in Sri Lanka, but even within that small country, taking the model to another district or another town has been a major challenge. So it's very frustrating, but I'm very happy to see that Banyan has somehow captured it and taken to other places. And now we have to keep that pressure going so that we go beyond that tipping point and it's enshrined in the state system or the societal system or whatever so that we don't go back. We have seen models that have come up and which have demonstrated very well, and unfortunately the pharmaceutical industry and various power bases have destroyed those models in spite of the evidence. So we need to be very careful that we take it past the tipping point to ensure that it is it has a strong foundation so that it's sustained. So we have a lot to do on that.
Great, thanks, Dr. Matt. I really love your idea that the answer to the global problem is localization and also connecting bottom up, top down. So that's a really good. And these devil models that might not function somewhere else, but you need to adapt and things like that. Very good. So now I'll pass on to Dr. Sujatha Rao on the role of perhaps the state in investing in ensuring sustainability. Your experience in the government, but as well building PHFI as well. Oh, sorry. Okay, I thought maybe I put the wrong interpretation, but I think it would be interesting to see, because health at the state level as well, and as per your perspective, given the insights as well that your panelist colleagues had shared, how do you view this going forward? Yeah.
Thank you. First, a disclaimer: I have done nothing for PHFI. I was only a founding member and their member in the board and the executive committee for 6 years, and then I left. So PHFI, good, bad, is because of the great work that they have done. I just wanted to say, because
no issues. I think that's okay.
That yeah. I have a great. Okay, now let's come to the more important issue of sustainability and scaling up. Now, sustainability of these interventions will necessarily only depend if it is scaled up on a national level and not be isolated to a couple of NGOs doing whatever they're doing in localized communities. And such a scale up, given the kind of diversity and the size of this country, I believe can only and only be done when government takes ownership over it. It cannot be done by any NGO, no matter how well funded they may be. Government has to accept its responsibility and be accountable for this, and by integrating it into their own public health policies. I'm afraid, though I worked 20 years in the Ministry of Health, mental health was never a priority. Never a priority. Even when I left, I feel very sad about it, because I really keep wishing that I had the insights that I've got yesterday, today, and before by interacting with Vandana in the last 1 or 2 years when I was Secretary Health. We had no insights. The ministry is unaware. So we really don't know what is happening on the mental health, because for us, mental health is equal to NIMHs, and IBHAS came in because the Supreme Court said you shall give 20 crores and set it up. It was on a Supreme Court order, and by force we had to set it up. We set it up. We cursed and we said our precious budget has gone, and that's it. We washed our hands off. But otherwise, it's just NIMHs. And NIMHs came up with some model, which is what we did. But I must confess that what we have done in say HIV/AIDS, which I keep recalling as I see the presentations here, is the same problem. The stigma, the kind of the target groups that you're dealing with in HIV, whether it's sex workers, whether it's IDU, whether MSM, all difficult, very difficult, and really at the bottom of the bottom in the poverty line, and in terms of discrimination, social discrimination and marginalization. So it's the same story with the mentally ill people. Now, for such a sustainability, I don't know how much time I have, because I can keep on talking, so you'll have to...
Yeah, I'll monitor, don't worry. Yeah. I want to do a short session because it's late, but I want everyone as well to... It's very interesting, yeah.
Only 1 or 2 points. Okay, 1 point only. So which point shall I pick up? Anyway, the point here is, for any scale up, the thing from the public policy point of view, I mean, I'm now putting myself in the government chair, is evidence and data. And so you take any program, whether it's TB, whether it's malaria, whether it's HIV, polio pulse, anything, immunization, was always preceded by pilot projects that were done. The technology and the efficacy of the methodology was tried out, tested, the costing came out, the budget implications were easy to see, and its importance for the country's health problems was ensured, and then the scale-up took place. Now here, mental health, we have it. We have it thanks to Banyan and thanks to all the NGOs. I see a huge critical mass available already. And in fact, when HIV scaled up in 2005 from a 500 crore budget, we scaled it up to 2,500 crore budget in 5 years, was largely because of, the Sonagachi model that we had for sex workers in Calcutta and one other. So, just that we studied it and we took it up. But we had a powerful advocate, and that was Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So, the timing also was very perfect because India was under a flag for not doing enough for HIV/AIDS. You remember, at that time, in 2005, HIV was the most important global concern. Unfortunately, for mental health, it's not sexy enough. And there's no global concern in that sense. No, but even WHO is not really driving it. So there's no driver, there's nobody there to tell, mental health has to be. Deepika Padukone came, but then she disappeared after a week. So, the point is we have to have a very strong advocate which can make the policymakers sit up and say, nahi, ye kuch to karna hai. So that is one aspect. But then in such a scenario, therefore, evidence and data and the efficacy of the strategy is being followed, and the fact that there is a model which can be adapted and taken by government is available is a huge, huge advantage for government to do without necessarily having a Bill Gates endorse it. So I think the timing is perfect. The economic survey, for the first time in 75 years, we have a whole chapter, a page on mental health. I've never seen health being covered, and now mental health out of that, mental health being covered. And I was just told that 2,500 crores has been earmarked from a piddly 1,000 crores. Now you see the importance. Government spends 45 lakh crores a year. Out of that, 90,000 crores is given for health. In central government, I'm talking about. And out of that 90,000 crores, 1,000 crores goes for mental health. So not even 1%, less than 1% on mental health. And out of that 1,000 crores in IBAS and NIMH take away all the money. Some little charity is left for the DMHP program, which is a non-starter. Take it from me. So, the reason is they don't have any models on which they can say, here's the money. Now, Vandana, your model to be scaled up may cost anyway, may require in the ultimate analysis a lakh of crores. So then the whole thing has to be seen as, first of all, the two constraints. One is how much money. You won't do it in 1 year. It'll take at least 10, 20 years for it to roll out. Not only because of the money. Money is not often the constraint. The constraint is HR. Do we have the team? Your team consists of a psychiatrist, a trained mental health nurse, you need social workers, and you need psychologists and so on. We don't have that manpower. If the country has 12,000 psychiatrists and you're in 500 districts, we set up home again for 50 beds, we need some 5,000 psychiatrists. So, the human resources of this team would be huge. And so that, therefore, training becomes a very, very important component for giving confidence to the government that, yes, we can take it up and do it. 100 districts, then 50 districts, then, incrementally, slowly, they scale it up. So that is why I keep, whenever I see you, saying, come up with a training institution, because the minute you go, I'm sure the government will accept this. They'll be willing to pilot it in 2-3 states. You already have Tamil Nadu on your thing. Kerala, he has tied it up. So there are states which are looking at this problem, but they'll also, where are the human resources? Who's going to train them? And this problem we faced when we had ASHAs. When we had 1 million ASHAs being produced, it was easy. Each village, they could identify the ASHA, but who's to train? And so we had this massive program of training the trainers in Abhebangs, Gachiroli, and then from there, it's a very, very, very big module development and all that kind of thing. So for scaling up, it is, I think the time is ripe. I think one should do very solid advocacy with the Ministry of Health. And I say Ministry of Health because they are the ones with the money. The states are all below poverty line. They don't have any money at all. So it's the states, it's the central government which will have to endorse it give the money and say, now you go ahead with it. You know, Tamil Nadu, Kerala may, but say Bihar or UP or something. So I think it's a great window of opportunity that we have today, and I'll be very happy to do whatever I can to try and push this agenda forward, because it's doable, it's a great model, and it should be possible. And now that, you know, we have a real capital of people who are tuned to this, it's very easy to scale it up. Thank you.
Thanks. That was extremely I really enjoyed it. I think you tapped into a lot of things. When you talk about training, there is enough scope and enough discussions about women labor force participation. What can we do? Can we bring trainers in the villages where women are with the filtering criteria as well to train? Oh, usually I have a very loud voice, so surprise. Is it working now? Okay, fantastic, great. Okay, fantastic. So, and a lot of points starting with the HR, the deployment, all the fine-tuned machinery required.
One important point. You know, and I say the timing is right because, as you all know, that the government of India has announced, not this time, in 2019, when it launched the Ayushman Bharat program, they said that now it's called Mandirs, Ayushman Mandirs. But anyway, it's basically a good old sub-center where 12 services were to be provided as a guarantee to every citizen of this country, as a guarantee by the government. And among them, as a guarantee. So this is even worse. Hello?
I think even the micros are tight. So just getting tired. We over-abuse them.
So, and one of the 12 services are mental health. But it has not rolled out, largely because we don't know what to really, how do we roll it out? What do you do? So there are a lot of people like Vikram Patel and all are saying Asha should be trained. Can they do? I mean, can an Asha, yes, in a sub-center, there are 2 ANMs, 1 BSc nurse, and then there are 5 Ashas, that's a team at the sub-center. Can any one of them be identified, or do you need a community trainer? Do you need these counselors, you know? So how much of demedicalization and community involvement can you do, both for in terms of economically feasible as well as people being feasible? So these are things that one has to, I would encourage Vandana to try out as a pilot in 1 or 2, taking the resources in the community, not your trained guys, but taking them and see how do they respond to these things, and do they, what is the training that they would do. But scaling up has all these implications.
Thanks a lot, Mr. That is very interesting. Now I'll pass on to Mr. Vijayanand, based on your experience, now the state perspective with little resources. I'll also have a question, and Ms. Sujatha, if you want to intervene as well. You talked about evidence and data, and for me it strikes a chord. I'm all about data and evidence. And I have been scouring for the past year any data source on mental health I could find. So there is some, but what I find is very difficult to cross paths to test theories. Say, for example, there's many mechanisms by which people experience mental health. You hear in the, like even we have a center or Sapiens Lab for Center Brain and Mind at Krea, where a lot of neuroscientists are thinking about, okay, plastic, your gut, your food, your environment, social media. It is very complex. So for that to decipher, and it could be a combination of things that are there. So I think we need data on mental health, but we importantly need data that we can cross-check those theories. Yes. Because that also means it's the right treatment, it's the right environment, and it's the right mechanism as well. So that's not an easy feat as well. So with that, I'll pass it to Mr. Vijayanand. If you want to address those questions at the state level and the data gap as well, maybe that'd be interesting. Yeah.
Now I'll focus on the political ownership. Without political ownership, at least in India, this will be a very, very, very small activity. So how to tickle or trigger the political interest is the most important. From my experience, all that is required is a good civil servant and a good minister. That combination doesn't come very often. So how do you, if that doesn't exist, how do you do? So I think, and surprisingly, though we talk of policy, data and all that, most of the policies in India, social policies, have come from a good heart. You can verify. Nothing from data and all that. Of course, data helps. If that doesn't come, if that good heart doesn't exist, or is weak, this kind of models which can be shown. Before models, a good advocacy. Good advocacy, that of course, one will be the emotional part, which politicians listen to more. The other will be the rational part, particularly the money value. Because I was part of that's in Kerala, diabetes control and prevention of diabetic blindness. So they are asking why, what will happen? Then when it is put in terms of money, how much the state will lose, then everybody agreed, yeah, it's a good investment, and they started a diabetes control program. So that also really helps. So advocacy will be pushed stronger with a functional model, which we have now. Where is not a money value, it's a value for money. You can do so much at 40,000 rupees a month. And the compared cost with a big hospital is 1/3, 1/4. That's an attractive proposition, particularly to the finance. And I mentioned in the earlier thing, if we can link this, there's an emotional political content, to a development paradigm of the state. As I said in the morning, Dravidian model. This is very important. Or something, Ayushman, whatever it is, or some Vedic principle. This is very, very important. That is going to be attractive. Then, if you can get the politician to declare a policy, means a document, which you have done, converted into an act, but a policy doesn't mean anything. A policy converted to a plan, and a plan will get a budget. A policy will not get a budget in India. So getting that will be very important. But in Government of India, I find there's a lot of political priority for natural farming in India. But it has not taken off even after 5 years. Because the processes, systems, the flows have not been designed. Here you have it. So that way it is a kind of advantages. Then we are talking about HR. One huge HR, community-based HR, which we are not taking into account, are the community resource persons from the community, from the SHG group. You train them, they are sisters, and they will don't burden them. There's also a big feminization of this work, that don't add it to their burden, then that will also work. Then of course, something which politicians find attractive is universalization. In India, we'll offer 100% mental health. Money may not be there, but once they commit, I think they have to show some results, otherwise they'll be pilloried. But practically, the hub and spoke model, well planned, works. Who thought India would have 10 million SHGs? When we started it in 2012, I was in Delhi. We didn't know. In central India, in north, in Kashmir. But ultimately, we now have 10 million SHGs, most of them functional. So it's not difficult if you have that very planned hub and spoke model to reach out. This is about...
I'll tell you a joke about this politics. You know, I was handling the blindness control program, and it wasn't getting any traction. And then Prime Minister Vajpayee had needed a cataract. So we were so happy. He was sent off to AIMS, and we trained the ophthalmologist there. While you're doing the surgery, you just dig it into him, the blindness. And then it got into his monitoring program sheet. Every month, he started reviewing. So look for some politician.
No, this is not, beyond a joke. I wanted to give it as a strategy. There will be a lot of people having somebody with serious mental illness in their families or relatives. In fact, a judge whose niece had a serious mental health problem took this upon himself as a PIL and came and called all of us and set up a whole lot of systems in Kerala. Then I wondered what is his interest. Then they said some not niece, a distant relative whom he knew personally, and he knew what the problems of mental health are. So that's very important.
Great, it's very fascinating, Mr. Vijayanand, and I agree with you. I think self-help group is a wonderful mechanism, good example. I also caution about layering too many things, because I think mental health is such a big problem. It cannot be just, oh, why don't you do this task as well? So I think you probably meant it in that essence. And I want to add to Mr. Sujatha, like I am Canadian, and Justin Trudeau's mother happens to be a big proponent of mental health. She has one of the biggest NGOs on homelessness. Her herself has suffered a lot of mental health issues. So it goes So it could be either someone's mother or mother-in-law as well, but it teaches wherever resource or things like that. I got to know a lot of mental health because of Margaret Trudeau kind of thing. So that's a good, I love that Indian Jugaad. Whatever works to get the job done. I just think it's amazing. So, Mr. Glick, last but not least, but I'll do another round with everybody because I want to keep this brief. So, your big question, and a very typical question, the role of philanthropy in this context to maybe stitch everything together and from your perspective, yeah.
So, first of all, I did want to tell everybody that I worked the first over half of my career on the NGO side of things. So I think part of the role of philanthropy is to have people that work within them to understand that side of things and know where the potential partners you might have are coming from and understand everything that they go through. The responsibilities, I feel there are internal responsibilities and then there are external responsibilities. So internally, I always tell my team that we have to be responsible funders. You know, there's all types of philanthropy out there, and I think that going kind of the middle of the road is the best way. It's not about just writing a check and walking away, and it's also not about micromanagement. So I'm saying this, and I hope that many of the partners that we support out there find that we're actually doing this. So, you know, the other point to make up front is that just because a philanthropy or a foundation has cash to give out doesn't mean that they're an expert in the things that they fund. The whole point of funding organizations like all of yours is that you have the technical expertise, and there has to be that ability to trust and communicate with your partners. So, you know, we talk about do no harm, which is, you know, a common term that when we decide who we're going to fund, we try to really ascertain and figure out that the programming is going to be an overall positive experience. And by that, we have to understand the issues and the scope of the problem internally. We do that by research, by working with a variety of different partners, regardless of the sector. As I explained earlier, our foundation works across 4 quite broad sectors. So a part of that is also researching the organizations, understanding the credibility of the organizations that we are giving funds to. And we also need to, I know a lot of our partners are not thrilled about this, but we do have to require accountability from our grantees, which ends up being in the form of reporting and transparent communications. And last but not least, internally, what we must expect of our partners is some sort of monitoring and evaluation plan. How can we look at these programs and try to understand if we are having that positive impact that that I spoke about in the beginning. Now, on the external side of it, foundations, philanthropies, we need to be that support for the organizations that we fund, that pillar that you can lean on and feel like you can have an open communication with. I feel like that is, that's something that's extremely important. We have to enable our partners to form other partnerships. One of the things that RIST ran into early on was that many of our partners, we were the only source of funding for some of our partners, and that ended up being a big problem for us, because if we decided when we were doing our strategy, if we felt like we couldn't go that particular route anymore, it could be that an organization had to end up closing their doors. And then that puts you in a situation of wanting to continue to fund an organization, not necessarily based on your strategy, but kind of based on what was said earlier about like kind of what's in your heart. So allowing those partnerships to flourish, even though you might be funding a particular program, is very important. Bringing other funders into the mix, creating networks with other funders and other implementing organizations. And that's what also we were talking about earlier, that networking is what I believe allows for programs like Home Again to be successful and to scale up. We found that many of our partners run into the same types of hurdles as they're implementing, and us being that binding source between our partners and allowing them, or even allowing for a venue where they can come and talk amongst themselves and come up with solutions to the problems that each one of them are having, is also an important part of philanthropy. And then, last but not least, is also to allow for capacity building of our partners. I think a lot of times funders, they take in an idea or a program proposal, and they just expect that things are going to go as it's written in the proposal. And kind of this goes back to having experience on the NGO side of things. Everybody knows that what you write in that proposal is not always what actually happens on the ground. And sometimes it comes down to the point of that the organization just needs some time to build the capacity internally. Whether it be even around monitoring and evaluation, that's a huge one. Is that we'll start implementing with a partner and then realize that they really don't know how to do monitoring and evaluation or how to report to us on it. So instead of just closing a grant, we will allow them to take training or to hire on an M&E specialist or something like that. So I think pretty much that's about it. I'm sure there are some more points or things that people might have questions about, but for RIST, that's it pretty much runs the gamut of what we expect out of a philanthropy.
Okay, thanks. That's very interesting. And I really love the fact that you're on the other side, the NGO. I think that helps as well from the grant side. I think all of us have experience with donors and this matching of minds and chemistry and wanting to go forward with stuff. I think that's critical. But knowledge on the ground is important. We're almost to the end because I mentioned it quick. What I like to do is just a very quick flash question to everybody. And Ms. Sujatha, I will let you decide which question you want to put, because I know you will have probably some ideas, so that'll give you some time. So a very quick question. So I'll start with Dr. Setoya. So not that I want to be provocative, but Ms. Sujatha also has a point where, WHO being so remote from problems, what can they do? Just very quickly, yeah. A 1 minute flash, yeah.
Okay, I used to work at WHO headquarters, Department of Mental Health, so I was at the core of them. It's not that we are not doing anything, we are doing a lot of things. Of course, the reach may be far, but there are so many things we have done. We have made a lot of guidelines, mainly targeted at low and middle income countries, including India. So we do have a lot of guidelines, documents, evidence, etc. on the spot. We have training materials. And we have been supporting several countries across the world in strengthening their mental health system. So we do have materials, and we're happy to support. And also a little bit about India. So I'm an NCD team leader, and I came only 1 year before. So I was kind of, last year I was focusing on mostly on NCDs, especially hypertension and diabetes. But I think we want to do more on mental health. And it's good that now, currently, actually, the leadership is getting more focus on mental health. ASM MD Madam Aradhana Madam had a partners meeting last month with WHO and all other US and all other partners, and she clearly mentioned that mental health is one of the priority. Of course, COVID has some role to do on this, but it's clear that it's on the agenda. So I think, of course, it's more about integrating mental health into general healthcare, PHCs, Arogya Mondials. So not too much on community mental health service per se, but I think it's going in a very good direction, and WHO is happy to support.
Great, thank you very much. I have a quick question for you, Dr. Mahesan. Probably alongside with this global sort of like potential that could be huge, what are the key things that people should prepare? Because it's already difficult to prepare for now, but imagine, the scope that things are just going to get worse. So there's probably different business models and things can people start thinking through. Any insights on that? Or you can also choose any you want, maybe that you're interested in conveying to the crowd as well. Yeah.
I think we need a paradigm shift in our thinking about how we deliver mental health services. I mean, as it was said, Vandana said on the first day, this institution or community care discourse has been going on for so long, and it has not led us anywhere. So I think we need to shut down. And we need this paradigm shift where we start looking at mental health in a different viewpoint. I mean, unfortunately, that hasn't changed much. Whether the patients were in institutions or whether they were in the community, now we talk about institutions in the community, right? So without that paradigm shift in our thinking, and also within the major professional bodies, if there is no change, we will be playing out the same show, whether it's institution or whether it's in the community or whether anywhere. It's not going to make a change. So I think we need to make that shift. And one of the problems has been why we have failed to get the politicians and the administrators' support is we have not been able to come up with a consistent model of what we want to do. Different bodies go and tell the politicians different things. Some want more investment in the institutions, some want to strengthen the primary health care model, others want like community care. So when we give such different viewpoints, the politicians find it very difficult. Whereas HIV/AIDS has been good in, they have like one model, do this. And so it's very easy to get funding. And that has been one challenge, why mental health find it difficult to garner funds, because we have not been able to come up with a clear evidence-based model. And very often when somebody comes with a model, another profession within the mental health field often undercuts it and says, no, this is not going to work. We need that. We need the latest medicine, no, whatever. So that has also been a challenge. So at least when it comes to this long-term care, I don't think there is that much of controversy now. We all agree that there is a group of people who are going to fall through the family system, the community systems, and there is going to be a small group of people who are not going to respond to medication, who need continuing care. But how do we provide that care in a respectful, maintaining their dignity? So I don't think there's going to be much controversy. So this could be a starting point where we all agree on something and give a consistent message to the politicians and the senior health officials in the finance ministry especially, to ensure that there is enough funding from the state sector, because as I said, that's the only way that we are going to sustain it. So we need to do that. Yeah.
Thank you. Very insightful. Mr. Glick, I have one question. Since you elaborated as well on the M&E thing, all of us have experience in filling those sheets, capacity building. I would actually say it's a cause of stress for my team. So I would want to say I'm all for monitoring evidence, but in topics such as mental health, it's a little bit delicate because there could be relapse, there could be so many things that go wrong, and one would underestimate, overestimate a few things, and that's normal. And numbers, for my love of numbers, I would agree we need some, but what would be a more humane approach to doing monitoring and evaluation, in a sense, instead of just having, I'll give an example. I was thinking through saying, instead of having just, okay, you have to reach this amount, can there not be a range depending on circumstances? Can there not be like a little bit humane that adapts to the condition? I'll just leave it to you.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And, as an organization, we have been trying to figure that out ourselves. And we've been, really digging deep and as an organization talking amongst ourselves, and even went out to a third party to try to assist us to come up with an MEL type of requirement that allows for not just talking about numbers, that we're really not all that interested in numbers. So part of our approach is we let our applicants create the indicators of success. Since they're the ones that have designed the program, we go to them and say, what do you think success means to you? And, here and there, if they say, a main activity is, we're going to do 10 workshops, yeah, maybe we might say, okay, how many workshops did you do? But that's not really the most important thing. It's like what came out of those workshops, So having that wider view and that again, understanding of what the project is supposed to accomplish, I think, is very important. And for each funding organization to understand internally what they're trying to accomplish in order to sync the grantees' indicators with the organization's indicators of success.
That's a wonderful answer there. Thank you very much. That's very insightful as well. Mr. Vijayanand, I have a good question as well. You had mentioned, and you were part of the Kudalsham Tree, I think, no? And that was a very nice, successful model. So what people are trying to do is, like I mentioned, often when I worked extensively with NRLM as well, and it's unfortunate Achket was not here today because he has this brilliant talk about how self-help groups did everything then what they were supposed to do. Like the credit linkage program has not taken off, but they have been wonderful results for the community. Could one not envisage sort of like a self-help group model only for health perspective? Because it comes from the perspective of not laying on something, but could there be a similar model that one can think of, replicating equity set, but for health perspective as a goal, yeah?
Interestingly, we have started a discussion fairly advanced stage, how Kudumbashree will take on this mental health as part of their activity. For your information, unlike other SHGs in India, which are thrift and credit models, the roots of Kudumbashree go back to health. Basically, reproductive and child health in a difficult situation like a district like Malappuram. So they started there, became very successful and expanded. And again, for information, your information, others, we don't call them a self-help group, we call them as neighborhood group, which is very symbolic. You are the neighborhood and you represent the bottom half of the population. And initially, now it's slightly become routinized, each SHG has a health volunteer who is taught the basics of health like vaccination and all that. So there's a huge potential for using Kudumbashree. But one thing which is happening these days, we are passing on a lot of state burdens and CSR burdens to the SHGs. So the feminists are coming out with strong critiques that women are already burdened. In the name of giving them relief, you are giving them, that we should be very, very careful about. So this is eminently doable, very practical. And we had a recent round of discussion with this thing, with the Tamil Nadu government. So I'll be facilitating, because I have some contacts in South India, to get this SHGs into this. It will be a great opportunity, and it can go into a larger awareness of mental health. The mental well-being part will be not just the treatment and this thing, a larger part is very much doable. They are at it, and probably in 1 year we'll be able to show some preliminary results.
Well, that's lovely. I'm all for the ideal of having a very clear role for a self-group member. I think clarity and training, that provides a lot of things.
Yeah, one more point is mentioning about monitoring. A lot of things happening, not formalized, on the so-called community-based monitoring. The SHGs themselves can monitor with clear indicators. And another concept which we discussed today morning, is not related to the question proper, is social audit, where the people audit this, and that will push politicians. When people are shocked, this is the situation. As I mentioned, that seeing so many persons with mental disabilities in one panchayat shocked the politician. So it could. So these two are important possibilities, distantly linked to social audit, so to SHGs.
Great. Thank you. That's wonderful. Mr. I'm very eager to hear the topic you want to convey. Very interesting. And you can close it and we'll take questions after. Thank you.
No, I would just like to respond to what Vijayanand said. SHGs are a great social capital in the communities, but of course their strengths and their relative, as an institution differ from state to state. And Kerala is absolutely on top of the line. So you'd have to really contextualize the entire engagement. But what is important, another model that you can closely look at is the HIV model. Now the point is, for a disease like mental health, what WHO, I mean, I'm not saying WHO doesn't do anything. They do something, yes. So, but the thing is, when HIV was so important, it was WHO that did the advocacy for us. And India, globally, the first health loan given by World Bank was for HIV in India. And that was definitely because of WHO. And WHO then also insisted that India has a NACO kind of an institutional framework. You know, it's very important. If you don't have an institutional framework to implement programs, and you're just one of the many files in the Ministry of Health, nothing gets done, whether state level or that level. So this is not your job. This is definitely the state government, and this is where WHO and World Bank and these institutions need to put mental health as a top line when they dialogue with the government, and think of an institutional framework of how to do, because this is a long commitment. It's not 1 day or 2 days, just like HIV. Now in HIV, we had the peer-led movement at every level, from the bottom till next to me, the sex worker would sit and not accept my guideline. I mean, I had to have her approval, the sex worker's approval or the MSM's approval to say this guideline can be approved. So at every level, including the ART centers where drugs are given, we have an HIV positive working there to see that, I mean, not that the drugs are diverted, but who is coming and who are the dropouts. So the dropout people get a phone from here, why didn't you turn up for the drugs? So, you know, this kind of an engagement of the community is very, very important for sustainability. And I think mental health is one area. You couldn't do this for malaria or TB because that comes, it's an episode. It comes, it goes, you get cured, you're disappeared. But in mental health, this is a kind of infrastructure, this kind of institutional mechanisms need to be developed so that you have a peer-led structure right from bottom, which is what you have. You have peer leaders, peer group leaders. It's a mental health, mentally ill person who's got cured will carry much more credibility with the next person than if I or a trained worker, health worker from somewhere goes and talks. So this has to be, so you know, one has to think through all this and have a feeling once the ministry takes interest and WHO works on it. Now the guidelines you also have, you all have. But what is the mechanism through which you transfer money and ideas and policies and come out with a design to finally reach the intended lot? That is the challenge. And I think that is where a lot of expertise needs to be brought together globally and within the country. And, you know, like what we heard in the last 2 days, these experiences. So ministry will have to pilot this, and, you know, WHO, if he's going to start taking interest, to give us the money for having these roundtables.
Just want to add a small point. What saved India from the worst effects of COVID, especially first 1 year, was this combination willy-nilly of the SHG, the Gram Panchayat, Village Panchayat, and the CSO. Everybody went away the first almost 1 year. These three groups came and faced it, which means that shows the potential if they work together.
And Kerala is super
Great. Thank you very much, everyone on the panel. It's been a pleasure, and at the end of the day, I know it's not easy. Thank you. Maybe I can just take a few questions in the crowd, yeah, for everybody. Yeah.
Thank you. Just a quick question. In many countries, it became very difficult to move from the big institution to the community-based services because the money are connected with the beds, the number of beds, especially in the psychiatric hospital. And if you reduce the number of beds, you lose money. You are not allowed to move this money into the community. And so this stuck the situation. I've been in some countries with the intention to move from one to the community, and the main issue was many times exactly this issue. And so need to overcome this issue. I wonder how it functions here. In Italy, we used, at the time of the transformation from the hospital to the community, was a law, was made a new law that allowed to move the money from the beds, from the structure, from the facilities to the community. In the second time, when we moved from the shelter residential structure to more personalized situation, we introduced the personal care plan and the personal health budget, a way to finance projects that allow to move from financing the facilities, moving the money around the person, so to finance the project, the personal project. This was amazing, because with the same money that pay one bed, you can allow the person to live in the house, maybe with the family. The family became much more welcoming if the person goes to the house with some money. I wonder how it functions here.
No, the only problem is, that the doctors are a very big and a powerful lobby. And they will never allow a dollar to go out of their sight. So the minute you suggest that let's cut down and de-institution, of course you have Dr. Jain and all of them to lobby saying that this is the right strategy, that's different. But otherwise, you can imagine a ton of bricks on the secretary and there'll be newspaper headlines and the ministers will be told, mental hospitals, you're going to shut down, what's going to happen, and they create a fear. So it is, but then the point here in India's context is that there's such little money that we are giving. Not cut NIMH. If I were there, I think they need double the budget, not even that is underfunded. We need to just increase money. We are spending 1.2% of our GDP on health. How much can you get out of that 1.3%? And what is this? Less than 1% of the total expenditure on mental health. So there is no option for India unless and until we increase the money, but the strategies. But I agree with you that over time, as you get into more community-based strategies, the importance of institutions will reduce and the budgets will begin to shift towards that end. I hope I understood your question right. That's going to be a process that will happen. For government, it's very easy to deal with drugs, beds, and doctors. It's so easy, One tender, everything goes, equipment and all that. But we talk about community, self-help groups, all that, it makes them very nervous, saying, what are we getting into? That's a big problem.
Yes, so my impression is that this conference has demonstrated how valuable is the Banyan model and also all the initiatives which are connected to it, and this clearly demonstrates that it's possible to take care of people with severe mental health problem in the community and build a system around that, providing the right responses, etc. On the other hand, if you are thinking about a larger reform, I think it's not avoidable to think what are the other components of a system. So I mean, otherwise you remain entrapped in the same contradiction that we currently have in Italy, to have set up a reparative model. So taking care of people in residential in the best way that is possible, including what has been developed in Trieste on a small scale. But what about prevention, active treatment, or the other components of care which must come beforehand, avoiding that people enter into a social drift that led them to homelessness, etc. So I think that's, I'm sure that India will find a solution, but definitely you need, and this is, I disagree completely with WHO, sorry, it's not just mental health gap or primary care model that can satisfy this. You need a secondary care model which is effective to provide community-based care. Otherwise, you reproduce chronicity, and then you have the reparative model coming up. Right?
No, I agree. But just one comment about India. So I think, yes, India is now revisiting the DMHP. So they're in the process of making a DMHP 2.0 with the leadership of the ASMD, who is the leader of the National Health Mission. So they are working on the revision, and they're trying to do a pilot in, I think, 10 states, and WHO has been supporting. So Yeah. Something is happening.
So, well, you know about it. We don't know about it. So, Professor Jain is with NIMH, and we.
Of course,
was
NIMH
with
is
NIMH.
involved in the development.
And there's all of us, several civil society organizations, peer advocates, but none of us is aware of this revision. So I think sometimes information asymmetry also contributes to how sustainable a system can be. For example, even the conversation over here, as much as it's integrated and there was a flow, equally so there's the government perspective, there's the funder and philanthropic perspective, there is the state or some perspective, the psychiatrist perspective or the mental health perspective, there's the WHO perspective, there's the civil society organization perspective. But I see limited space for overlaps, and I think one of the aims of this conference really was for these overlaps to be established so there could be a dialogue between different players. For example, does the WHO dialogue with, let's say, RIST, who support many initiatives focused on community inclusion? Or does the state dialogue with organizations such as yours or ours or several of our partners to synthesize knowledge from the ground and then for it to feed into policy? Very limited. Yeah, that was just a comment. Yeah.
We just talked a little bit about this earlier, about prevention. And philanthropies and funders can play a big role in this. And basically, just like they've done for quite a while now with like gender issues, mental health needs to be one of those issues that you try to infuse across all of the programs that you might be funding. Like even in certain points when we fund a program based on the environment, we might require that applicant to have some sort of mental health component to their program. Sometimes it's not appropriate, but when it is appropriate, we should start to really try to do that. Even in healthcare. Healthcare and mental health are seen kind of as two separate things. A perfect example is we fund a large amount of mobile medical units. And it wasn't until recently that we tried to get any sort of mental health services onto those mobile medical units, because for the longest time people just said they can't do it. So we came to the point where we're like, okay, if you can't do it, then we're going to have to look for somebody else that can try to do that. And it may not be the perfect solution, but if we don't start trying those sorts of innovative types of programs, we're constantly going to have these silos of sectors that are all looking for funding and all looking basically in the same places for that money.
Great point. Any other questions? Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. And to Vanessa's point, I totally agree. I think this should be just a beginning. And I think a lot of people attempted synergies and things like that. But I think these types of events bring people together. Great. Thank you very much.
No, this is also for thanks. We are all passionately talking on everything. But I was noticing this girl was doing the sign language, was more passionate than all of us. I don't know whether you noticed it. Fantastic. I mean, her face conveyed all of her things.
Thank you. Yes, thank you all. Really appreciate your... Yes, actually, Mr. Yutaro and Mr. S.M. Vijayanand, if you could please stay. Just for a while, it's all good things. Yes, the rest of you, please. So I wrote here, I said I won't keep you all for long, so we won't keep you all for long. But we do want to thank you all for your patience and really your compassion all day, for staying engaged, but also being really diligent with following through with the conversations and the discussions and the debates that we've had. Today it's been a very full day, and we'll be back here tomorrow at 9:45 on the dot to begin the day tomorrow, as we've mentioned before. All day we've talked about experiential comparisons of long-term care and inclusive living. We've heard from our Home Again Scale-Up partners about how they started, their stories, the journeys, the challenges, some of the solutions. We now ended with this fantastic panel on sort of the various perspectives of health systems, health financing, what we need to do, what's remaining to do, and what we need to learn at local, regional, national, and international scales. We want to thank Amalie and Shiba and Tiruchelvi for being our friends, being who they are, and telling us their stories, because this is really what we do. We do this for them. And again, like I said, we'll be back here tomorrow to continue these conversations, and we'll be back here at 9:45. And we've retained Ms. Sujatha Rao and Mr. S.M. Vijayanand to really thank Rose, Silas, and Nitya for their absolutely excellent help and engagement with providing sign language assistance. Please come on up. We've got a small gift for you. We've got a lamp for each of you that's made by our service users that we've had today as part of their vocational training. So please, if you would, we'd appreciate these small gifts being handed to them. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. We also have a fantastic tech team. They've been absolutely wonderful. And we've got a great logistics team. So we'll come back. We'll do more thanks tomorrow. But have a great night, everyone, and we'll see you at 9:45 a.m. Yes, we've mentioned the change. Yes, please remember the change in schedule, 9:45 a.m. Thank you. Thanks.